Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Finance's annual budget hearing for March 17th, 2017 to order. This evening, we will be doing the following, and hopefully sticking to this order if I can remember it over the next half hour to an hour. The Board of Education will be making their budget presentation. At the conclusion of their presentation, they will entertain questions, and once those questions have been satisfied, we've gone through any questions, we'll have the Board of Selectmen come up and make their presentation on their operating budget, and we'll also cover the debt service budget. I would also ask that both cover your capital projects that intend to go out to bonding during your presentations. Upon the conclusion of the Board of Selectmen's presentation, questions will be welcomed, and then we will move towards general comments on the budget. The rule of thumb is the same. If any speakers come up, use the podium, please. Name and address for the record. And with that, the Board of Education will be making their presentation now.
Good evening, Mr. Hoey. Thank you. It is nice to see this many people out this evening. We are pleased to present this budget to you. You'd be aware that the administrative team has been working on this budget since early October this year. Board of Education has been engaging with this budget since a little bit later than that. We have hosted multiple public hearings, public input sessions, and then meetings with the leadership team and the board to come to the budget that we present to you this evening. Without spending any time on these first slides, I would just remind the board and the community that our budget is a reflection of our values in the school system. It grows from a vision and a mission for instruction in our schools. It is founded upon annual priorities that are set by the Board of Education. While these are annual priorities, I'm proud to say that they have been consistent over the last several years, focusing on the learning experience, the professional environment, and the overall health environment that we create for our students. We begin by looking at the specific initiatives, the work that is on our plate, and the specific areas in which we are working, and it builds from a palette of budget assumptions. I will only highlight the last one here. We expect to be creative and innovative in how we use existing resources. We do not come to the community or to this board to ask for a new resource before we have looked at the resources that are in place currently and thought about how to better use and better leverage all existing resources. And a budget grows from the enrollment. We budget for the students that we anticipate to have in our classrooms next year. Currently, we are projecting for an enrollment next school year of 3,352 students. That would be a reduction of 65 over the current enrollment that we have in our schools today. I would only note that last year we stood here and projected that we expected to see a decline of 75 students going into this current school year, and in fact we went up by 24 instead. I will note that against projections, Guilford Public Schools has essentially held at 3,400 students for the last 3 school years. That is not what the demographic projections told us we should anticipate. That is not what like towns across Connecticut are seeing, but Guilford has seemed to stabilize the enrollment declines that other suburban communities are seeing around the state. All of that said, the budget request that we have brought to you tonight is a request for $58,770,136. This is an increase over the current fiscal year of $863,345, or a percent increase of 1.49%. To put that into some context, it is the lowest increase that we have brought before this community since my time in this community. It's not the lowest budget. We know that last year our budget was only approved at 0.69% increase over the previous year. But if you look, that we have been decreasing their asks from this community over the last several years. My initial budget last year was presented to the Board of Education at 2.85%. The board brought that forward to you and to the community at 1.99%, which was the lowest request we'd made for an increase in the last 5 years. This board reduced that to 1.73%, and we know that ultimately it was approved at 0.69% of an increase. That was an increase of approximately $300,000 over the previous operating year. The budget begins, again, as I mentioned, by looking at the resources we currently have and by attempting to leverage every efficiency that we can find in the school system. This budget specifically builds on a series of newly negotiated contracts with all of our employee units. The Board of Education has worked hard over the last 3 years negotiating contracts with all of our groups. This past year, we negotiated with the teachers unit and the administrative units. And by moving our employees into high-deductible health plans, this budget recognizes a savings of $500,000 in healthcare-related expenses because of those negotiations. We also, every year, look carefully at our salary line. This budget brings reduced teaching positions, not dramatically reduced, but reduced teaching positions over the previous year, reduced paraprofessional positions, full-time equivalents that we have reconfigured and repurposed to meet needs without having to ask for new positions, and as every year, but more specifically this year, very thoughtful and efficient rehiring. Any retirement that was replaced this year, principals had hard hiring caps. And so as people were hired into positions that had become vacant, we saved money by hiring less experienced replacements for more experienced employees going out the door. Principals and our department heads have worked very hard to reduce the cost of supplies and materials in this budget. We have worked to keep those costs down, and as this board noted, we have worked to bring down the per pupil cost associated with supply and material purchases. And just to illustrate one of the efficiencies, we've worked long and hard on special education funding in the school district. We are proud of the services that we now can provide in-house to our special education students. We believe that we're meeting the needs of more students in their home schools with their friends and neighbors. But I also want to illustrate the 3 lines. The red line that tracks across the middle is our actual educational expenditures. The blue line that is even more volatile is our budgeted educational costs. You will see that in school year 14-15, we were overly optimistic about efficiencies that we were generating by bringing these services in-house. You will see that over the last 3 years, while we continue to try to hit that number exactly, we're getting closer. We are predicting better. But what I want to draw to your attention is that if we hadn't changed our practice, if we had continued the path that we were on in 10-11, 11-12, and 12-13, our spending would be $2 million higher than it is. Now, that's not savings, but that can be discussed as costs avoided. If we hadn't changed the way that we were thinking about and providing service to students, we would still be sending more students out of Guilford to outside tuition schools, I believe getting lesser service and at a significantly greater cost. We're very proud of these numbers, as you can see them here. With the efficiencies, however, are going to come cost drivers. This budget does see an increase in salaries. I will remind this board that we are a people-driven business. 85% of our budget, as we bring it to you, is a reflection of salaries and associated benefits. Salaries do increase this year. We have negotiated 5 new contracts with our bargaining units. Employees are recognizing reasonable wage increases in these contracts, so there is an increase in salaries despite our work to keep that increase limited. The capital increase, as you see it here, this doesn't speak specifically to a bond request, but this does speak to trying to put money back into the maintenance line that this board has encouraged us to build over the last 5 years. That line was reduced by $250,000 last year after the first and second referendum. We are looking to put monies back into that line, approximately 130 of the 250 that was reduced. You'll see that there are offsetting decreases in other capital lines. Services increase really reflects two cost centers. One is in the special education services for students that we are keeping in district. By keeping students with greater needs here locally, we are now contracting some service into the district rather than sending students out to receive those services, and that does represent part of this $300,000 increase. Part of that increase is that the new high school and the systems in the new high school are beginning to come off warranty. And so we are beginning to enter into maintenance contracts for some of the systems that are no longer under warranty. That is reflective of some of the dollars you see there. And again, special education continues to be difficult to predict. We will this year have tuition and transportation expenses in special education that are above what we had predicted earlier when we brought our budget to you last year. So those corrections are included there. These 5 cost centers would represent an increase of nearly $1.4 million just on their own. And again, I'll remind you, the budget we bring to you tonight only has an increase of $863,000. The efficiencies, and most particularly those medical benefits, offset these cost drivers that come into our schools. And I'll say again, as I've said every year as I come in front of you, I am not presenting a status quo budget. The Board of Education is not bringing you a standstill budget. We do believe that this budget improves the services that we provide, specifically in these areas. This budget does continue our focus on job-embedded, on-the-ground professional development, specifically with a focus on mathematics instruction. This budget does afford our first time ever delivery of international baccalaureate classes at Guilford High School starting in September. This budget includes the last component of building out our special education continuum with a special education support program that will be placed at Adams Middle School next year, giving us full coverage for students with greater needs than we've serviced previously from pre-K all the way to age 21 within the Guilford Public Schools, not having to send students out. We will have a continuum that meets all of those needs. This budget includes restoration of athletics that were cut last year, as well as an expansion of athletics in response to the community comment that we heard. We held more than 3 public evenings, and at every one of those evenings, these were the most significant comments that we heard, and it includes those capital investments, and I'll speak to the bonding investment that is requested at the same time. I'll go through these very quickly, but just to show you a little bit of what those look like. The investment in math coaching, we are asking for 1 additional coaching position. These are instructional coaches that I'm speaking of. We're asking for 1 additional instructional coach. Currently, we have 8 full-time professional developers in our school system, and with those 8 positions, we're able to provide literacy instructional coaching grades K through 6, but math coaching only occurs at grades 6 through 8. With 1 additional position, and by restructuring the positions that we already have in place, rescheduling an entire school allowed this to be more doable. By only adding 1 position, we will continue to provide literacy coaching K through 6, but we will expand math coaching for every teacher who delivers mathematics instruction in grades K through 8. So when we talk about repurposing existing full-time equivalents, this is what we're talking about. We're not coming forward and asking for 4 new coaches to make math coaching happen. We're only asking for 1 position to facilitate that. The International Baccalaureate Program, we feel it's important to point out that this cost is shared. We will be staffing those new classes with existing staff at the high school. There are no increases in teaching staff at the high school to cover the new IB courses that we will be providing. Offering International Baccalaureate doesn't increase the number of students that will be coming to the high school next year. It does create scheduling challenges for our administration, but we'll cover those classes with existing staff. We have staff already trained and ready to deliver those courses. The cost of exams, as they are with AP courses, will be borne by the students and their families who choose to enroll in those courses, but the cost of membership, registration, and fees that will be due to the International Baccalaureate Program will be borne by the school district. Special educational programming, as I mentioned, we'll be placing a new program at Adams Middle School this year. There is no request for additional teaching staff or paraprofessional staff. We will cover the needs of those students with existing teaching staff. There is a request for an additional school psychologist position part-time, and there will be costs associated with needing to needing to change some of the physical settings in the school. There will be some facility work that needs to take place to make those spaces appropriate for the programs that will be delivered, but the most significant cost would be staffing, and we have covered that with existing staffing. As I mentioned in athletics, this budget does include the restoration of a cheerleading coaching position at Guilford High School with an expectation that at least a minimum of 10 students will participate. In fact, we have established an expectation of 10 student participation for any athletic program. If we're going to expend the money for coaching, for transportation, we want to be able to benefit at least 10 students. This budget also includes the addition of 2 coaching positions, both a boys and a girls high school swim team coach. This is, I think, specifically the single item that we heard the most public comment about, and I do want to note that here the cost is also shared. While the school district will bear the cost of these coaching positions, the cost of pool time, transportation, officials, other costs associated with these new teams will be borne by the students and the families who participate. We have similar shared cost arrangements with both the crew teams and the hockey teams that currently exist in our programs of studies. And the capital bond request as we bring it forward, parallel to our operational budget, we will be requesting $3.9 million in bond request. This primarily goes towards Baldwin. Baldwin has both the original windows and the original heating and ventilation systems from the 1970 era construction. We have been challenged by that heating system. While it has held up better this past winter, last year we had significant issues with that heating system. So there's a $2.7 million HVAC upgrade, a window and door project. There's also a small amount of money included for a Melissa Jones roof project, engineering and architectural expenses, and that brings the full bond request for $3.9. I will note that the Board of Education had no capital bond request last year that came forward as part of our budget. And just to summarize the staffing impact, as I said, the most significant impact of staffing in our budget is staffing. There are no changes to administrative staffing this year. There's no request for increase. Teaching positions, while we are projecting a decline of 65 students, there are associated staffing reductions there. We do expect to require 2 fewer elementary classroom positions next year. We will be able to reduce some of the elementary world language and media center time associated with slightly smaller numbers in the elementaries over the last several years. There's the addition of the math coach and the school psychologist, as I highlighted, and the additional 0.2 is a 1-year only increase to the high school as we look to revitalize and reframe our world language curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade. We will be providing the department chair at the high school with 1 additional release period to focus on that curricular work across the school year. That is a one-time only increase, that 0.2 that you see there. We've worked very hard to be efficient in how we provide special education services. We expect to be able to reduce 4 paraprofessional positions next year. And there is an increase in custodial of 1.5, but I do want to note that those are 3 part-time positions that will come without associated benefits. So essentially, for the cost of slightly less than 1 full-time position, we'll be able to bring in 3 part-time positions and spread that across the buildings. In the last 2 years, we have reduced or eliminated custodial increases. We really want to care for and maintain the buildings in the way that they need to be maintained. That creates an overall staffing reduction of 3.4 positions this year as we bring the full budget forward. And then just to give some context to what those staffing numbers look like. In school year 9-10, we had an enrollment of 3,700 students. We currently have an enrollment of 3,400 students and have held stable at that number for the last 3 years. Next year, realistically, we're going to be somewhere between the 3,352 that we project and 3,400 again, I believe. You will note that the certified staffing hasn't increased at a similar proportion. Hasn't decreased in a similar I'll note that it's decreased, but I'll also note the bottom of the page, which to me is the most important. Again, it goes to repurposing existing resources. So while our enrollment has decreased by approximately 300 students, and our staff has only decreased by half a dozen, we have added full-day kindergarten, which we did not offer just a handful of years ago. We have added the embedded professional development, the instructional coaching that I spoke about, which we didn't offer before. And when Mr. Bloss talks about the results that we see in our school system, I can tell you without hesitation it's a result of the way that we support our teachers and train our teachers in the classroom. And we have added those special education programs, that programming for students with greater needs from kindergarten through age 21 that we previously didn't offer. We're talking about approximately 30 positions that could have been cut out of our budget, but instead have been repurposed to provide greater programming for our students. We see the results of that in the fact that we're keeping more special education students in our schools and meeting their needs, and the fact that we are a preeminent school district in this state. And again, when Mr. Bloss talks about results versus investment, you will see the effect that repurposing those positions rather than eliminating those positions brings to the school system. And with that, I will thank you for your time and turn over the podium to Mr. Bloss.
So when I was before this board a couple of weeks ago, I told you that the state of Connecticut had just done its performance analyses for our district, and I told you that the state of Connecticut said that we were within the top 10 districts in the state. And that was true as of 2 weeks ago. It's not true any longer. We are now 6th in the state, but all K-12 districts. That includes the Fairfield County schools, that includes some very high-achieving school districts, and among the districts that are similar, we are number 3. Specifically, and I know the type's a little bit small, but this is statewide. We are ranked behind some outstanding school districts. We are ranked ahead of some outstanding school districts. These are the top 20 in the Connecticut State Department of Education's Accountability Index. Darien is first, as you can see. Trumbull, New Canaan, Greenwich, Region 12, that's Washington, Roxbury, that area, and then Guilford. Now, just for your information, you might want to know, as Board of Finance, what do those towns spend on education per student? Well, Darien spends, Guilford spends a little over $16,000 per student, $16,458. Darien spent over $2,000 a student more. Trumbull, at least what they report to the state, they are less. And I'm going to come back, I'm going to take a look at Trumbull's budget and see if there's something the town does in Trumbull rather than in the Board of Education budget, because it's under by about 1,000, which seems like a lot, especially with a Fairfield County district. New Canaan is $19,000 per student. Greenwich, $21,000 per student. And Region 12, which we are roughly almost identical in terms of performance, reports to the state that they spend $28,271 per student. Very small district, and so they've obviously got some capital issues or efficiencies that I think that we can take advantage of that they can't. But the point is, we are in some very good company here with our performance. Now, what Dr. Freeman has just talked about are just numbers. I think what I would like to suggest is that this didn't happen by accident. This did not happen just because Guilford is full of high-achieving students that are just able to be turned loose in a school and reach this level of performance. I think that there's a combination of what the administration, the faculty, parents, others have done in terms of prioritizing what is important, and especially the embedded professional development that I do wish was named something other than coaches, but they are, nonetheless, it is the embedded professional development that we have had such a great experience with. This is our ranking, our performance index within our reference group, similar demographic schools. Now, just purely on demographics, we should be at the bottom of this list. We're not. We're number 3. Connecticut Coalition for Achievement Now says Guilford High School is an A. U.S. News and World Report refers to our pass rate. But I think the interesting bullet on this is the middle one. Actual performance on tests is better than predicted based on demographics alone. We're very proud of that. What about the cost? We're 49th most populous. Our per capita income is 26th. Unemployment is almost at the bottom out of 169 towns. Our net current expenditures per pupil are right in the middle of the state. Our equalized mill rate is below average. Our adjusted tax levy per capita is in line with our per capita income. Equalized net grand list. Debt per capita is near the average. And this is all from the OPM Municipal Fiscal Indicators just published. So how does our increase compare to the rate of inflation? We're asking for 1.49%. The United States inflation rate is 2%, expected to creep up a little bit over the next couple of years. What's the impact on taxes? This is our current mill rate right now in Guilford, 28.76 mills. For a house that has a fair market value of $500,000, our budget would add about $149 to property taxes. For a $300,000 house, $89, and that is, as I've been fond of reminding the board, fully, for those who itemize, fully federally income tax deductible. And for 800 families in the senior tax freeze, no increase. The committee did just meet. The program is in great shape right now. The amount of benefits has basically plateaued as we predicted and projected, and so this program is working very, very well. So here's the big question. We're going to spend some time, I suspect, talking about this evening, I hope. What about the state budget? Well, our budget referendum is in 6 weeks. The last day of the General Assembly session is June 7th, and then they don't even pass the budget then. They'll do a budget implementer session a couple of weeks later. And our fiscal year is going to start within days after that. Now, you might have read yesterday that the governor and the legislative leadership proposed a state law that would allow towns to postpone their budget referenda, or budget development anyway, until after the state passes their budget. I don't have any more information other than what I read in the newspaper. And I know CCM is supporting that. The Council of Small Towns is a little bit on the fence about it, it seems. But the fact is there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And we don't know today what the budget, the state budget is going to include for Guilford, but there probably will be changes. I think from talking to colleagues around the state, there are three basic approaches that towns are taking. One is to pretend nothing is happening. And to assume that the state aid is not going to change materially, and if it does ultimately, that their intention would be to send out supplemental tax bills. That's one approach, and there are some towns that are taking that. The other polar approach is to assume that the governor's budget is going to pass without any changes. Highly unlikely, but there are some towns that are at least trying to start down that road. What we are trying to do here is, I think, something in the middle. And that is, I know that for example, educational cost-sharing grant goes through the town side of the budget. The town is assuming a greater cut next year than there was this year, and I think that's very reasonable. It may be that we are going to have to make more changes moving forward. I'd like to propose, though, to this board that whatever budget we pass, you pass and send forward to the voters, that whatever the impact is from taxes on that, or the projected impact on taxes, that we stick with it. That this is going to be what the tax impact is going to be, regardless what the state does. We can make it up in multiple different ways, depending on what happens, but I don't think really anybody who is a close observer of the General Assembly thinks that any of the governor's major proposals are likely to happen. And we can talk about that, and I'd be happy to do that. But that is, I think, a promise that we have to make to taxpayers, that we will not be sending out supplemental tax bills, and I think we can do that. We don't get a lot of state aid, frankly. We're getting to the point where it may be better for us to just say, thanks, but no thanks. We really don't need your guidance anymore on things like teacher evaluations and some of the unfunded state mandates. There is some interest in the legislature to allowing districts to get out from under some of those mandates. So one of the things I get asked occasionally is, if you don't have children in school, what's at stake? Well, we know that the value of the housing in Guilford is directly related to the quality of schools. And so Realtor magazine says that living in a high-scoring district can add $200,000 to the value of a house. So that is, sure, taxes here are higher than they are in some towns, but the value of the home is is reflected in the quality of the schools. So I would urge anybody to go to our website. We have a lot of budget information on the website, including some discussions about some of our capital needs, and that is where more information can be given. We also actually do have on our website an opportunity to ask questions of the administration or the board, and I know a few people have already. If there's some uncertainty about something, or you'd have a question, just go onto the website and we can answer it right away.
Wonderful.
So that is where we are, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience on the Board of Education budget. Is there anyone who has questions of what you just saw, heard, didn't see, or didn't hear? Hearing no? None from the public? What's the pleasure of this board? Do we want to ask questions now, or we want to save them for Thursday evening's workshop? I've got a couple. We can certainly go into much more depth on Thursday night if we need to.
Either way is fine with me.
Okay. Just a couple of quick ones that I had jotted down while going through, while listening to your presentation. First off, on the architectural and engineering costs and the bonding, is that related to specific projects?
The Baldwin, mostly
It
the
is
Baldwin
that,
project.
okay,
Yes.
and we're just removing it from that project,
Yeah, we're just breaking it out.
breaking it out. Wonderful. Staffing. What happens if the projection realities happen the same way they did last year, and we don't wind up with 65 less students? What happens?
Well, it partly depends on where they would be, obviously. You know, when we talk about 60 students difference over a 13-grade school system, unless they're clustered in one place, it's not really going to lead to any staffing issues. Okay. It's not going to lead to any changes up or down. I think the assumption is, the belief is that there's going to be a decline in elementary enrollment. If it has happened that we've had to hire an additional teacher or two out of existing appropriations. If we have to do that, we have to do that. But we have not come back to this board and asked for more money based on enrollment increases ever, or for any other reason for that matter. And I think our promise is that we would handle that out of the appropriated budget.
Okay. The last one I had, and this is mostly for the benefit of the viewing public. How do you the unknown component, or the most volatile component of your budget, tends to be special education costs. What is the methodology you use to estimate the costs that we just saw here this evening?
Yeah, so currently we actually simply budget for the students that we have in the school at this time. So we know our students down through pre-K. We look at those students, we move them 1 year forward, and we budget for their needs. Special education students leave the district, stop receiving service either when they receive a high school diploma or when they reach age 21. In fact, we're responsible for the entire school year in which they reach age 21. So we know our students, we plan for them, we simply move those expenses forward with a very little, a very small contingency for additional needs that may emerge over the course of the school year. The reason for the volatility that you see in that chart, in that graph, is that it's difficult to know from year to year when students are going to develop new needs, or quite honestly, when students are going to move into Guilford. A student moves in September or December or April, and if that student has special education needs, we're responsible to meet those needs. What we don't want to do is we don't want to budget, a generous sort of surplus in that line and then not need those dollars. And so that's the reason for the difference. What we currently do in addition is that we net out the value of the state's excess cost grant. We have never received the full amount that the state has owed to us. This year we expect to receive about 70%. That is, additional volatility next year moving forward, not knowing exactly what may result with that grant.
Thank you. Anybody else want?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up on
I noticed that you're moving the special education programs into Adams this year, but there's not a corresponding increase in special education staff. Is that a reflection of the, for lack of a better word, the aging of the students as they move in, and so the same instructors or paras that they had with them will be moving with them to Adams? I just, if you could just clarify on what's going on with that, that'd be helpful.
So in fact, there are several things that are going on. We do have a number of students who will be aging out this year. We have students who are either going to be graduating, receiving their diploma, or they have they've reached age 21. So we have some capacity at that end of the system because of those students who are moving out. Yes, we've also been growing these programs. As we've been working with you over the last few years, when we started looking at outplacements, we had the greatest number of outplacements occurring at the two ends of our programming. At the high school, we had students who were developing needs that they hadn't exhibited earlier, and we needed to be able to respond to those. And we created a program at Lakes Elementary School for our very youngest students who had autism or autistic-like concerns. Those students are aging through the system. We put programming in place at Baldwin 2 years ago, and yes, so to some degree they're carrying those services with them, and to some degree we have capacity because of students who are aging out.
You're not budgeting for any retirees this year, is that correct?
No, we are budgeting for retirees this year. This budget assumes a salary reduction of approximately $200,000 that is based on impending retirements and then rehiring for those positions at a lower dollar amount. This is the first year that we've brought this to you in our base budget with that offset built in.
And how many retirees is that?
That accounts for about 5 retirees, but they have to be in the right subject areas. So Connecticut, like a number of other states, is experiencing a teacher shortage. So if those retirements occur
in some areas.
Yes, in some areas. If those retirements occur in certification areas like elementary education, English language arts, or social studies, we should be able to recognize an offset and a savings. If those retirements occur in areas like high school mathematics or science or world language at any grade level, we're going to be sorely challenged to find a teacher to fill the position if we're not willing to offer experience and hire that teacher away from an existing position.
Okay. One more question. It sounds a little cynical, but I'm going to go with it anyway. You mentioned that the IB program was going to be staffed by teachers that were currently on the payroll.
Yes.
How do you respond to this, to comments last suggestion that doesn't that imply that we could have been operating with fewer teachers up until now?
No. So International Baccalaureate courses is a rigorous course of study that we will begin offering that we had not offered before. So it's a new offering that we're bringing to the high school. But we're not going to have more students in the high school than we've had previously. We're going to have the same student population. We're asking our staff to offer more opportunities to the same number of students. So it's a scheduling challenge. We will now have an English department that needs to offer general studies courses, honors study courses, AP courses, and IB courses. But they're not needing to seat more students than we had previously sat before.
Or fewer.
Right.
I mean, that's the point. The kids are going to have to be in a desk somewhere.
But are your teachers taking on more teaching hours?
No, they're not teaching, say, an AP class.
So, right. If I was an English teacher last year at the high school, I may have taught 2 general studies classes and 3 AP courses. This year, I might teach 2 general studies courses, 2 AP courses, and 1 IB course. It's the same size pie being served to the same number of students. We've added a flavor.
I have a question.
I may have tortured that metaphor.
Let's think that one.
Let's not put that one in the paper, please.
Peter. I have a question. At the beginning of the school year, in an effort to reduce transportation costs, we were utilizing mapping and so forth, trying to get our routes more efficient. But I noticed cost of transportation actually has increased. How successful were we with the routing and so forth?
I think that to paraphrase the long-serving member of our board, Barbara Dudley, who said that when you start to make a change in public education, you really need to see what it looks like after 3 years, not the first year. We took some very tentative first steps on changing transportation and going to more cluster stops. There was a lot of pushback on it, frankly. There were a lot of the community did not like it because we have basically been historically offered a very different model for providing services. We wound up, I think we feel like we're in a better place than we were a year ago, and I think we now believe that we can continue to move to make the whole cluster stop setup more efficient and more accepted, frankly, by people in the community. But the increase is really not really related to that. It's much more related to either special education transportation or it's just some accounting changes. The way that our finance office does the accounting for transportation changed, and there are more items on that line now than there used to be. So it doesn't reflect really what is happening in transportation. We've got a great contract right now with STA. It I think is a very minimal increase year over year, and so we're comfortable with that. I think that if that answers the question, I think that really we want to keep looking at cluster stops. We want to keep looking at, is there a way that we can go to 2 bus waves? That's not going to be easy at all. It may not happen in my lifetime, but that's something that we'd like to take a look at, because if we could do that, that would be a big cost saver, I think.
We feel that we've started to change the expectation around bus service and that we will see efficiencies in future years. Any efficiency recognized this year would have been minimal. However, students riding the buses and their parents have recognized that the runs are different. We've had a small number of parents who have recognized that their students are going out to the stop 5 or 10 minutes later in the morning than they had to in past years. So we've started to move in the right direction, but not significantly enough that we've generated significant savings. But we said it was going to be a first step. We didn't want to make changes that were so draconian that we would lose the support or the trust of the families that we serve.
And there is a proposal kicking around in the General Assembly right now as part of the state budget issue. You know, we have to provide a seat to everybody who is enrolled in our schools on a particular route. But now, for those of you who drive your kids to the high school in the morning, you know that there are quite a few kids that are not taking those seats, and they are driving, or they're having their parents drive them to school. So one of the proposals in the legislature is that parents be able to sign away the opportunity to be on a bus. And now, you know, it's an interesting question, why would you ever do that? But it could be that is part of the proposal in the General Assembly. If that happened, then when we only had to provide transportation to, say, 2,800 students, yeah, that would probably allow us to reduce buses. Sure.
I was going to say, if you just pick up 15%,
yeah,
you're doing
Sure.
better. You could really significantly change.
Depending on where they are. I mean, you know, we've got some really challenging runs. We've got a couple of bus runs that we have to go into Durham for quite a distance, which, you know, I guess there's not much we can do about that now, but back at the time, I wonder whether that was thought through. But in any event, we're working on it.
You also have a couple more questions on the busing, too. So just to take away some of the euphemisms here, I mean, when you talk about cluster stops as the new model versus the old model, so the old model, in some cases, was literally stopping at consecutive driveways.
Pretty close, depending. I don't want to overstate it. I mean, you know, yeah. I mean,
we've all been in that experience. We've all had that experience.
Sure.
And we might still do that on some of the major thoroughfares. So when we're picking up students on Long Hill Road, we might still be required, if there's a turn in the road, to stop consecutively. Essentially, in most cases, when we talk about cluster stops, what we mean, though, is picking at the intersection of a cul-de-sac rather than turning into every cul-de-sac. So as we move through those main arteries, we will stop at an intersection of a cul-de-sac with Long Hill Road and expect residents from that cul-de-sac to walk to the intersection, as long as it falls within walking parameters within the board policy. So we do not expect high school students to have to walk more than a mile in policy. We don't expect younger students to walk more than half a mile. And the reality of our runs is that while policy is set at half a mile and a mile, we are really actually implementing at a quarter mile and a half mile. So we are trying to make sure that, again, we're changing culture and we're changing expectation, but we're doing it slowly, thoughtfully, responsibly. The bus will stop at the intersection, traffic on that major artery will stop, and then the students can leave that cul-de-sac. And that creates a faster bus run.
Thank you, because I think a lot of people have questions about what that really means, and those parameters aren't necessarily well understood. So you got ahead of my next question. So I'll turn to my other question, which is regarding the coaches, for lack of a better word.
The embedded
Instructional coaches.
I can't even get you guys on the same page.
Well, no, I just think it's accepted within the education world that this is what they're called.
Because the concept is similar to what
yeah,
you're
it
doing.
is.
Exactly.
But it's like wait a minute, how are we hiring 8 new coaches or whatever? Well, we're not hiring 8 new coaches. And,
Well, I'll tell you the questions that I get a lot is these are included in your certified teaching staff. They're
Correct.
not included in your administrative line item.
correct.
That's
They're-
correct.
But
They
they
are
are,
teachers.
in a sense, a hybrid role. Let's be fair.
No.
Okay.
I think
I'd
I
like
would
to
put
push Bill even to stop him for just a second. This is good. But
Well,
But the baseball analogy applies. They are pitching coaches. They are not the manager of the team. So the principal in the building, the principal holds line authority, and teachers are accountable and responsible to their principals. Principals make recommendations about whether or not that teacher remains in our employ. A coach is there to partner with the teacher and make the teacher more effective in the classroom. So think of the pitching coach versus the manager of the team. The principal will decide who's going to be in the starting lineup. The coach is there to make every player perform better than he or she is performing today. And that's where the name came from, because of that analogy. So they are teachers, but they are master teachers. They are in the school to work with every teacher who teaches within the subject area in which they specialize. It's English language arts or hopefully math. And their job is to plan with that teacher, train that teacher, maybe run model lessons for that teacher. They give feedback, they partner with. So they do every version. We videotape teachers in the classroom and they deconstruct what they see on those videos. They partner closely with their principal, but there's a very clear delineation between instructional coach and principal.
If I had to just say, by the way, the performance data that we got and our performance on the standardized tests, I think our board is pretty convinced that there have been a lot of things that have obviously played into it, but probably the single largest item, especially with English language arts, is the embedded professional development, the instructional coaches. And I want to just note, though, if we didn't have these instructional coaches, it's not like we would be doing no professional development. This isn't if we didn't have instructional coaches, we're not going to spend any money on training teachers. That's crazy. We used to spend money.
I've asked the variation of that question. But the saving, we don't come anywhere near, it's clearly more expensive than sending people out for professional development. But it's more effective.
It's much more effective.
Exactly.
I appreciate that.
That's a good cost-benefit question, right?
So on our website, there is an 8-minute video that talks about the return on investment. We've had English language arts coaches in the district for 8 years now, and we've had math coaching only at 3 grade levels and only for two full school years. We do well in both English language arts and math assessments, but we do significantly better in the English language arts assessment. And I firmly believe it's because we've had 8 years of embedded professional development for teachers in those subject areas. And the only way, I think the most direct way that we're going to see the performance improve in mathematics to that level is by following the model that's been successful for us in English language arts.
Okay, so I'm sorry to monopolize this, but 2 additional sort of related questions on the same line of the coaches. Embedded development. So you've already, Dr. Freeman, I think you were ahead of a couple of my questions already, and I think you touched on it. It sounds like the principals are primarily responsible for evaluating the performance of the embedded development in their school?
No.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So,
I thought you were going to say of the teachers.
So
no, I want to know who's, I'm going to use the word coach, guys.
Right,
Okay.
so
who's responsible for evaluating the performance of the coach?
The instructional coaches are teachers, but they are assigned directly to central office, and they are supervised directly by Associate Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Keene.
Okay.
The reason for that is that Dr. Keene and I have too many times seen a coaching model where simply the best teacher in 4th grade is told, guess what, you're going to be a coach next year, and stays in that building and works for that principal. And it's too easy for that person to be pulled out of coaching and asked to cover a recess duty, or asked to substitute for a teacher who's out, or that job gets muddied. By assigning those those positions to central office and having them report directly to Dr. Keene. They get trained together. We do specifically train them, and they're not responsible to the principal. They're responsible for partnering with the principal. And our principals are very well trained. If they say, Lou, can you run over and cover that class for me? They are trained to say, sure, is it okay with Dr. Keene? And the principal doesn't have the assigning authority, only the curriculum and instruction office does, and that keeps their time focused on teaching and learning. They're there to develop teacher skill. They're not there to help out the principal when there's a shortage of some kind.
So it would be, in your perspective of their performance, it would be a disadvantage and a dilution of their effectiveness if they started getting pulled into classroom duties.
Yep, they partner with, well, they're in the classroom all the time, but they're in the classroom only with that teacher.
Yeah.
Their responsibility is to the teacher, and by impacting all 17 classroom teachers in an elementary school, they affect the performance of every single child. But they don't work with students directly unless they're doing that in partnership with that classroom teacher.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Thanks for all that.
The coaches are just K through 8, or are they all the way up through the high school as well?
They are currently only K through 8. There are no instructional coaches at the high school. There's a slightly different model at the high school with department chairs. I would love someday to be able to have instructional coaching at that high school level, but it's a different model. There's more subject area specialization at the high school level, and no, there are no coaches, there are no instructional coaches at the high school level at this time, and none in this budget, no requested.
I just want to have a quick follow-up off of the stuff Lou was talking about, and I love your analogy, manager-coach, that works well for me. One of the things that I think we had some discussion around this last year, the principals of the schools, are not coaching the coaches. They're not responsible for the coaches. What's the average span of control? That's a term we use in business an awful lot, span of control in terms of employees, managers, employees to manager span of control. At a typical elementary school, what's the span of control that a principal has?
You're talking about in terms
Number
of
of
the
direct
number
reports.
of direct reports. Well, it would be everybody in the building.
Yeah, so principal is responsible for everybody in that building. You're going to have approximately at an elementary school 16 to 18 classroom positions. You're going to have all of the related arts teachers. You're going to have special education staff, and you're going to have resource positions. So you can say 35 to 40 teaching positions in any building. You're then going to have paraprofessionals who work in that building with the classrooms in the classrooms. You're going to have custodial staff of 2 or 3, one during the day and a few at night. You're going to have secretarial positions. So an elementary principal could be responsible for 50 people. And if you look at our grade level structure at the elementary level, there are 4 full-time principals at the elementary level, and there is 1 full-time special education coordinator at the elementary level. At our middle schools, we have 2 full-time principals and 2 full-time assistant principals and 1 middle school coordinator. And then at the high school level, you have 1 principal, 1 assistant principal, 2 deans, and then 1 special education coordinator. So if you look at our district by levels, elementary, middle, and high, there are essentially only 5 administrative positions assigned to each of those broad levels.
Thank you.
Just one other question. One of the efficiencies in your presentation was the savings for the medical benefits. Have you cycled through all the bargaining units?
I am very pleased to say that we, out of our 7 bargaining units, we have nobody in the traditional old-style insurance program. 6 out of the 7 are in this high-deductible health plan with health savings accounts. The 7th is in a union-sponsored plan that we pay a premium, and then the union provides the coverage. We're currently in negotiations with that unit. I'm gonna be able to give you some more information about that once that contract gets ratified. But we are now completely out of the traditional style plan, and the savings. I think Dr. Freeman said that it was saving $500,000. That's true, but it also avoided going up $200,000 or $300,000. So that was actually a very substantial benefit financially just from the teachers' contract. And I want to just acknowledge that the teachers really understood that this was time. The teachers and the administrators. Correct. They were very positive about it. This was not like we didn't have to get involved in a lengthy give and take. I think all of our units, our bargaining units, understood that this really is the direction that municipal health plans are going.
So the good news is we've cycled through. The bad news is we won't be expecting another $500,000.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, the bad news is we're not going to see that kind of a percentage decrease, but the baseline changes. That $500,000 is going to be built into our budget now indefinitely moving forward. That $500,000 reduction. So, it's a very positive development.
Matt, I know the town wants to go, so I'll make this quick. The IB program and the swim and cheerleading. Could you talk a little bit about what the total costs are, truly, for those?
Sure. The cost to the district of the IB program is approximately $30,000. As I said, the staffing is covered. Cost of the examinations would be borne by the families. When you look at cost of registration, membership, and fees associated with being an international baccalaureate school, it's approximately $30,000. The cost of the athletics, as we've identified them, is about $18,000. We're talking about 3 coaching stipends. It's about $6,000. It lands to be about $18,000 to put those 3 athletic opportunities into our course of study.
Okay. Something to go to what Lou was saying, and I just want to confirm this. In the summary that we have, there is the district summary, and it talks about professional development. There's trends that go back 5 budgets. In 12-13, it was $118,000 for professional development. Then it went to 181, then to 48, 41, and the last budget was 89, and we're somewhere in the 64 right now. Is that because of the embedded professional development?
Right.
And it's because there were some spikes in state expectations. There was a year or two where we had significant training that was required around new teacher supervision evaluation models, as well as Common Core standards that were rolling out. So there would have been a spike a few years back.
And part of those numbers might also be that we did some outside professional development and also for the International Baccalaureate program before we had actually applied. We trained teachers into it. It was great professional development. But I think that's probably part of some of those lines.
Correct. And even when we spend professional development money outside of the coaching salaries, even that money gets spent differently now than it was in the past. We are much more likely now to contract with a provider who will come and work with us across a school year over repeated dates, rather than send our teachers out to a one-time event or a 2-day training seminar and expect them to bring that work back. In fact, we have brought some of those trainers and professional developers to public meetings in the evening with the Board of Education so that they're aware of what's happening in training in the schools as well.
I'll save my third question for Thursday.
Do you have one?
We had a question from the audience. If you wouldn't mind come up, name and address for the record, please.
I'm Joanna Meyer from 88 Dramara, and I'm new to Guilford, just moved here this summer, have a child in the schools, and I'm really impressed in terms of the budget and the reallocation of the resources to try and meet a lot of the same needs without increasing the total cost. One thing I am hearing, though, as a former teacher, and I still work in education and education research, is I'm hearing a lot of savings at the expense of the teachers. And I appreciate what you're saying in terms of folks understanding that this is the way municipal benefits packages are going. But I know that Guilford is a great place to live. It's a great place for kids to go to school. It needs to be a great place to teach, too. And so I worry a little bit when I hear about pushing teachers onto high deductible plans, or not pushing, but encouraging them. And I also worry a little bit when I see things like a 0.4 reduction in a world languages teacher, because how do you reduce? I mean, that's like reducing someone from a full-time job. So, and likewise with the custodians. It's just tricky. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I very much appreciate the comment. We think along those lines every time that we look at these savings. So the health plan to begin with. The health plan actually is the same health plan. It offers the same services. There's no interruption. So the doctors are the same. Essentially the coverage is the same. What we're doing is we're pushing responsibility for administering that coverage to the individual. So every one of us, I will now be more responsible for keeping track of my health care, but my 4 sons will have the same health care that they've always received in the past. And we were one of the last school districts in the state to make this move. I've only been here for 6 years. I'll tell you that I'm still very happy to say Guilford's a great place to teach. I'm happy to be an employee of this school system every single day. When we make those staffing decisions, we do it very thoughtfully with our administrative team. We think about what that means as it impacts those staff members. We think about how we can use them, and in many cases, the teachers have been instrumental in bringing those changes forward. The very first in-house special education program that we launched at Lakes Elementary School came from a group of teachers who brought it forward and said, we think we can meet the needs of these students differently. So we want to encourage advocacy from our teachers. Teachers write curriculum in this district. Teachers request the resources that they want in this district. We are responsible to the community. Making budget decisions is never easy, but we try to do it as respectfully and as collaboratively with our teachers and administrators and all of our employees as possible.
Anyone else from the audience want to ask a question or even make a comment at this point, since that's what we just entertained? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? 3 times? Sold. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Board of Selectmen. The first selectman just took a...
Do we have to switch computers, though?
Yeah, I think we have to switch computers, so let's take a 5-minute break, please. All right, we are back, and Joe Mazza, our first selectman, is going to be making the presentation for the town budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Before I begin my presentation, I just want to comment on Mr. Bloss's remarks regarding the state situation. It's on the matter of our state funding, or I would like to call it municipal funding back to the state. It's also a matter of the teacher's pension, but if the chair would allow me to comment on that later, and I'd like to make my presentation first because I do have some comments and some additional information. I was at CCM this morning, and I can probably update the meeting a little bit more on what went on this morning. But first I'll start with the presentation. It's my pleasure to present the Board of Selectmen's budget for 2017-2018 to the Board of Finance and to the public this evening. This budget we feel is a well thought out budget. It's not a budget that was built on a house of cards. This budget is built on sound financial judgment and analysis and takes into consideration unprecedented reduction in state funding. The objectives of this budget is as follows. We have constructed this budget without reliance on fund balance for the 8th year in a row. This budget is also takes into consideration funding of our capital projects within the operating budget, although we do have a request for bonding this year. We are funding our pension liabilities at the recommended levels that our actuaries have suggested. We continue our investment in infrastructure and road reconstruction. Also, we maintain high level of services despite, like I mentioned, the reduction in state funding. We maintain, again, as Mr. Bloss had mentioned, the senior tax freeze program at its current levels. This year, we're asking for an additional police officers and we are continuing to provide a school resource officer. We continue our investment in economic development, and we continue this year again to invest in the ecological improvements to Lake Quantipoc. We've increased our funding in tree maintenance and our removal program, and for the first year, we're incorporating the Guilford Lakes Golf Course into the operating budget. Our budget is broken down into two parts. The first part is the operating budget, and the second part is our debt service. Our operating budget is increased by $664,000, or 2.37%, and the debt service budget is increased by $422,000, or 5.67%. The debt service budget includes all projects for the town and the school, including the new Guilford High School. This next slide is a slide that shows you the budgets that were submitted by our department heads, which was a total of $29,727,000, which was a 5.88% increase. The Board of Selectmen then reduced this budget by almost $1 million, or $987,000. We reduced the department budget by $441,000. We reduced the capital budget by $529,000, and employee benefits by almost $16,000, and that gives us a $987,000 decrease, which we are presenting to you tonight. There is no reduction in debt service because we can't touch that at all. Increases to our budget are as follows. There's $271,000 in salaries, which equates to less than a 2% increase. All our salary increases total about 1.9%. This includes all negotiated salary increases, in addition to the one police officer, which I had mentioned. Also, they have provisions in this salary line for contracts yet to be settled. Employee benefits increased $217,000, or 3.14%. Operating increase $41,000, or 1.22%. And the capital increase $134,000, or 14.15%. And that's off what was reduced last year when we went to a third referendum. The total department budgets increased, like I said before, $664,000, or a 2.37%. And the debt service, you see again, increasing to 5.67%. This slide shows you where our employee benefits increased. We have increased our pension plan contributions to $212,000. That's a 9.37% increase. This increase is due to a lackluster performance in our investments during the fiscal 2016 year. But we continue our commitment to contribute the full amount of our pension contribution recommended by our actuaries. Our pensions funded for the town is 88.69%. That's almost 90% funded. And our police pension plan is also funded at almost 90%, or 88.37%. Bless you. Through successful collective bargaining, the costly lump sum provision has been eliminated, and the defined benefit plan is now closed to all new hires. The pension budget also includes projected funding of almost $176,000 to our defined contribution plan. That is our 401A. The medical cost has decreased, as you can see here, by almost $54,000, which is almost a 2% decrease. And that decrease is due through increased contributions by our employees and reduced benefits on the waiver plan. The components of our capital budget, as you can see here, total $1,086,000. And it's various projects such as drainage, sidewalks, and bridge projects of $175,000, backscanning and PC upgrades of $116,000, community center improvements in this building here of $58,000, field and lake improvements of $42,000, park and rec equipment of $167,000, and that includes vehicles, and police vehicles of $173,000. This slide here is one that I think you've gone accustomed to if you've been to these meetings. Every year we like to show how we increase our funding of capital projects through our operating budget. You can see from 2011 we were at $488,000. Where we have a policy we like to share is how we like to fund our capital expenditures around $1 million through operating. And as you can see, we're trying to do that, except in the year budget year 2017, we had to cut back because we had to go to 3 referendums. This year we're at over $1 million. Okay? This slide here demonstrates our request for our capital bonded projects. This year we're asking for 3 bonded questions. The first one is inland road reconstruction for $1 million. Over the last several years, we have been reconstructing our coastal roads. Now we're turning our attention to our inland roads for $1 million. We have 3 emergency service equipment projects that we are asking bonding for. One is a 30,000-gallon tank installation. That's an in-ground tank for $125,000. Ambulance replacement of $260,000. The ambulance we want to replace is, we bought that ambulance in 1995, so I think it's time to replace that ambulance. The heavy rescue vehicle is a 10-year-old vehicle, and that is $1 million item. The total of the emergency service equipment bond question would be $1,385,000. The last question is for town facilities improvements. There are 2 items there, which total $275,000. One is park and rec infrastructure, which is $175,000, and the last one is town hall building upgrades of $100,000. That includes the upgrade of our elevator and electrical service panels. Okay. We do not ask the voters to approve bonding appropriations every year, as you can see from this chart. The town usually does it every other year, as you can see from this bar chart. Okay. And what we have tried to do is reduce the amount of bonding appropriation we have asked for. As you can see, if you look at year 2012 to where we are in 2018, each year that we go to a bonding appropriation, the amount decreases. And the next chart will show you why. This is a chart that compares our bonding appropriation request to our capital expenditures that we fund out of the operating budget. As you can see, the bonding appropriation requests have decreased, and our expenses out of capital expenses out of our operating fund increased. And the reason for that is as we continue increasing our capital operating expenses each year, we decrease our reliance on our long-term bonding to finance these major capital purchases and improvements. Our objective is to control our future interest costs by decreasing the amount of debt we incur and fund capital projects on a pay-as-you-go basis. To recap, the town budget from 2013 through the proposed 2018 budget demonstrates that we continue to reduce our operating budgets as outlined in this slide. Okay. Please note that the fiscal year 2016 was an anomaly since contributions to the town pension plan was substantially reduced by $1.4 million based on the recommendation of our actuary. The total for the last 3 years of 2016 through 2018, and the overall increase of the town budget, excluding debt service, was 1.04%. I'd like to turn our attention to our revenue budget. This is the problem. Okay. The revenue budget consists of 3 components. The first component, which is the largest, is property taxes. And this is why we're all here. Property taxes is calculated using the grand list as of October 1st, 2016. By the way, which our grand list was increased by 0.36%, or just over $11 million. This increase was calculated at the current, I stress, at the current mill rate. This added an additional $323,000 to our taxes. To our tax calculation. The next portion of our revenue is intergovernmental revenue, and that's local revenue, generated by town departments as estimated to increase by $148,000. This increase is due to interest income, town clerk and emergency service fees, and police outside service fees. The third part of our income is state revenues. This is estimated based on the governor's February 8, 2017 proposal, with the exception of the ECS cost-sharing grant. Now, I say that because if we use Governor Malloy's estimated revenue, there would be no excess cost sharing. We'd have to send him a check. We're not going to do that. What the Board of Selectmen decided to do, and this was based on conversations with some of our legislative contingent, is we took what we received in the current fiscal year, which was reduced from what we were told we were going to receive, and reduced that by 15%. And as you can see there, that's a reduction of $582,000, almost $583,000 in revenue. So instead of receiving what we would normally get, which would have been $2.9 million, we calculated that we're going to receive roughly about $2.3 million. That's a reduction of almost $600,000. Now, we can argue that later on, but at least we're recognizing that we're going to get a substantial cut from the state. But in the governor's budget, he's given us zero. And like Mr. Bloss said before, he doubts very much that that's going to happen. Am I right, Bill? Thank you. Okay. But to produce a budget, we have to come up with some revenue number to pass on to the voters. Karen, could you go back to that slide, please? Okay. So we've come up with total revenue of $95,388,169 to balance to the expense number. Next slide, please. If we take into consideration the Board of Education budget, which was presented a little while ago, and you take into consideration the town budget, which we just presented, and the debt service, we come up with a total budget of $95,388,169. And that is your total town, school, and debt service budget for 2017-2018, which we are presenting to the Board of Finance. At this point, I'd like to turn over the debt service portion to our Finance Director, Mary Jane Milavesi. Mary Jane?
Good evening. The debt service budget is composed of three main categories. We have the new Guilford High School, which represents about 43% of the debt budget, the school facility improvements, 21%, and town projects at 34%. Through refunding of existing bonds, the town earns proceeds that have been set aside to offset future debt payments. You can see from the slide that in 2018, we estimate $542,000 of current proceeds that we've already set aside, and an estimated $205,000 for future refundings, which will directly offset the amount of debt paid for the high school. This is a savings of $747,000 due to our sound debt management planning. This graph represents existing and proposed capital projects for the school, the town, and the entire debt for the new Guilford High School. And it also includes estimates for authorized but not yet issued bonds. You can see from the graph that 2016 and 17 budgets have already absorbed increases in the debt service for the new high school. The refunded bond proceeds, as I previously discussed, have been applied to the high school bond payments to smooth out the increases between fiscal years 2017 and the peak year of 2021. The delta that you see between the dotted line and the top of the columns represents opportunities for new debt that could be absorbed without any budgetary impact. This slide illustrates the difference between the town's original estimates of total debt service for the new high school, which was presented back in 2011, and where we actually stand today. We have scheduled our bonding in such a way as to allow us to take advantage of refunding at lower rates and to use the proceeds to reduce our annual payments. This has allowed us to save over $26 million in debt expense as compared to the original estimates made in March 2011. As you can see from the graph, our original estimates had us paying for the high school through the year 2047. Now, our last payment will be made in 2038, a savings of $26.1 million in 9 years. For example, a taxpayer with a home that had a market value of $500,000 in 2011 is estimated to now save $5,500 in taxes from what was projected at the start of the project. So I think Guilford has done a really great job. Thank you. I'm still Durham.
Thank you, RJ. Okay. I'll try to wrap this up. I just want to give you some significant highlights of the budget process. First of all, we began our budget process back in November with our capital budget, our 5-year capital plan, where the departments worked with the finance director and produced a 5-year capital plan, which we had budget hearings on, and then produced the 5-year plan, and then we produced a document which was then worked on and decided what was going to go into the operating budget and what was going to be presented for bonding appropriations. Then the Board of Selectmen received operating budgets from the department heads back in January, which then resulted in the Board of Selectmen cutting almost $1 million, or $987,000 from what the department heads had submitted, or a 60% cut from what was submitted. In that budget that was submitted, salary increases were less than 2%, a 1.9% increase. The operating expenses in this budget we're presenting to you tonight have operating expenses of 1.22%. The total increase of the town's operating expenses, exclusive of debt service, over the last 3 years have been 1.04%. The revenue calculated in this budget, estimated by the Board of Selectmen, we've taken a stab. Some towns have taken a stab at it, some haven't. Some have used the governor's budget. There are 169 towns, and there's 169 different ways that they've calculated revenue. We have reduced revenue by $582,000. What does this mean for taxes? That's what everybody wants to know. The projected tax increase. The projected tax increase, I'll say that again, is 2.27%, or 0.65 mils. The governor doesn't want to increase your taxes. So he says, Joe, you have to increase the taxes, because he doesn't want to increase the income taxes. So he leaves it upon the towns to increase the property taxes. Now, that's not a cop-out by me, because we knew our taxes were going to increase when we all agreed, or 65% of us agreed, to build the new Guilford High School. We knew that was going to happen. But we've got a brand new, beautiful Guilford High School costing us $92 million. That the state is picking up about a third. And they haven't reneged on that, by the way, thank God. All right? And you heard the finance director say that over the course of the funding and what we had said we would be paying for in debt service when we first proposed the high school, through some very creative funding and just keeping our eye on the ball and some good luck in the financial market. I'm not going to take all the credit for it. The town's not going to take all the credit for it. We're saving $26 million. And it's costing us an increase of 2.27%. Do you know what the rate of inflation is as of February? 2.5%. So I think we're doing okay. No one wants their taxes raised. I don't. But I think we're getting a pretty good deal with this new high school. Can we do better? Sure, we can do better. But right now, this is the best we can do at this point in time. This is a great town. We have wonderful, fantastic emergency services. I think the best in the state. We're a AAA rated town. We work very hard to get there. Excellent education system. You heard the chairman of the Board of Education. You heard the superintendent. You heard this young lady come up here and speak of why she moved to Guilford, to the education system. But that all comes at a cost. So in summation, I'm going to say that we have a continued growth in our unassigned fund balance, or rainy day fund. which demonstrated our prudent financial management. I said, in addition, we have a AAA rating from Standard & Poor's, and they're not the only ones. Finch Rating Service has recognized us also and give us a AAA rating. We've been recognized for our zero-based budgeting and conservative approach and management style. We've attained this while improvements to our town infrastructure, and we've been recognized for what we have done with our road system, and like I said, our emergency service people, and all our town services. And as always, we're there. When that alarm rings, our people are there, and we're ready to answer the call. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I wish to extend appreciation to Selectman Ballas Tracy, Selectman Haverner, Selectman McKelney for their support for this budget. I would also like to thank the Finance Department, especially Finance Director Malavasi, and my Executive Assistant, Karen Kirscher, and the staff of Selectman's Office, and especially all our department heads, boards, and commissions for their hard work and cooperation in the preparation of this budget. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nice job. Thanks. Presentation. I'll open it up to the audience. Any questions? Name and address for the record.
Yep. Hello, Susan Anderhagen, 200 Landon's Way. I have one general question and then one more specific question. So as you guys know, we had many budget meetings last year because of the budget being voted down. And during those meetings, there was reference to some plan that had been put together in a prior year that was ideas for expense reduction. And there were several requests during those budget meetings to look at, did we implement any of those? And I still didn't hear any reference to that in this plan, so I think as a town we would be interested to know what happened with those recommendations. That's a general question. And then just a non-general question is, I see, I've never run a police department or fire department, but just in looking at the budget trying to find is there anywhere we could cut, there's a lot of overtime in the fire department, in the police department, even though we're adding a police officer, and in communications, which I don't know exactly what that is, there's overtime. So I was just curious as to why we pay so much overtime.
One of the reductions that the Board of Selectmen made as part of that $987,000 was a blanket reduction of 0.5% in 4 departments. And it was police, fire, public works, and park and rec. And we said to the heads of those 4 departments, you've got to come up with reductions of 0.5% across the board in any line item. We felt that the chiefs and the heads of those departments knew best where they could cut. So in certain areas, they did cut some of their overtime and in other expenses. In the operation of, and I've got the 2 chiefs are here. They can come up if they want to answer it, but I'll take a stab at it. When you have emergency service departments, you have to provide personnel 24/7, as you can imagine, okay? And you have to provide a certain level of staffing. Okay? The personnel in those departments are human beings. They get sick and they have vacations and whatever. There are times when you don't have the proper staffing, you have to bring personnel back in. Now, in the police department, if an officer is on a case and he's past his time of duty, he still stays. If he's on an accident, he still is there. He has to stay there. And I've been called to accident scenes because sometimes when it's severe, it's part of my job to be there. They can be there for hours, which means they're in way into their next shift. That's all overtime. Am I right, Chief? Correct. Okay. Okay. If it's a major scene, it doesn't have to be a murder or something. They're called, other officers are called in. That's all overtime. In a fire situation, the same thing. We have a staff of 8 firefighters, EMTs on duty all the time. We have a major fire or major incident. We need more, or the fire continues. The fire just doesn't, when your shift is over, the fire is not over, okay? It's not finished. They have to stay there. That's all overtime. Okay? And the reason why it goes up, as these firefighters and police, each year they get an increase, of course, then the overtime increases. Okay? You guys want to add anything? Was that, Chief? Okay.
We want to address the first question?
Oh, no, first one. There was a member of our board who wanted to have us look at more efficiencies. When I first took office, one of the areas I wanted to look at, I don't think you were in town then, was to look at efficiencies, and we established an efficiency task force. They did a very good job, and we started, and they produced a very nice report. One of the items or things we started to do was to start to pick away at the items. Sorry to say, by the time I leave office, we probably wouldn't accomplish all of those. But one of the members of our board last year was complaining about the efficiencies. And I asked her, I said, once we get the budget passed, which didn't happen until June 14th, I said, would you like to head a committee to take on and look at that report? I didn't say recreate it, look at that report and work with the Board of Finance chairman and the Board of Education chairman. And she said, yeah. And we appointed her at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And I think you'll have to ask her the rest of the story. Okay, thank you. Want to say anything, Matt?
No, we'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks.
We'll leave it at that.
I have a question.
Anybody else in the audience have questions? Hearing none? Lou, you want to go first?
Mr. Mazza, so this is the first year we are going to bring the golf course into the operating budget. Going to be part of Park and Rec?
Nope. Be on their own.
Yeah, it's on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it'll, so will the Golf Course Commission continue to oversee that?
Yep.
Okay. So that has traditionally run a deficit as it was operating previously as an enterprise, right? Who is responsible for, and I guess going forward with is going to be the same Golf Course Commission. I guess I should just say it this way. The Golf Course Commission is responsible, are they not, for comparing fees and trying to maximize revenue? What are the advantages and disadvantages of just increasing the cost of a round of golf? If you know.
You play the course, Lou, right?
I love it.
Okay. I think the question is a good one, because for the citizens in this town who don't play the game and don't play that course, they ask the same question. It's a matter of competition. On a daily fee, it's very competitive in rates. It's not competitive. Matter of fact, it's very inexpensive if you're a member. Okay, I think I got to look at the rate fee. I think it's about $300 or $350 for a yearly membership. Okay, the closest competition would be Apple 9 in Middlefield, which is part of the Lyman Golf Complex, which is run by Billy Casper. I get their emails, and I believe that if for comparable membership, senior like I am, it would be roughly about $600.
Okay.
Okay, that's quite a difference.
Sure.
All right. The difference there at Apple 9 is they have a driving range. We don't. They have the ability to offer motorized carts. We can't because of the terrain. They have eating facilities. We don't. So you getting the comparison? Okay. So, but on a daily rate, green fees, we're very comparable with them. So I think if, from a business decision, if we were to increase our annual fees, or membership fees, I think we would lose the members we have now because we don't have the amenities that other courses have. I think we would lose.
And I know this has certainly come up. I think probably everybody here has heard it, but I'm not sure everyone in the community necessarily knows this or understands it. But golf courses traditionally have a clubhouse and a bar, to just put it plainly. And this is a municipal property, and accordingly can't serve alcohol?
It's not because a municipal property we can't. We could change the ordinance to make an exception. The problem is the proximity to the Guilford Lake School.
Okay.
Okay? Because the Board of Selectmen have made exceptions when asked to for golf outings at the Guilford Lakes on a weekend for certain golf events, like St. George Men's Club, for instance, would come to us. There's no school in session on that Saturday when they run the event. But to serve it on a daily basis, we couldn't.
So
because there's a zoning issue, too.
There's a structural reason
Yeah,
why.
there's a
I
zoning
didn't
issue.
appreciate that,
Yeah,
but that
okay.
makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Okay. So obviously that revenue is just not there.
Right. And that's another thing Apple 9 has. They have, I think they can serve alcohol up there, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks.
Right.
Any questions? I just had a couple on our revenue estimates. Joe, I think I heard you say that the numbers that were presented here, which showed a 2.37% increase, are inclusive of the anticipated grand list growth, the revenues from anticipated grand list growth?
Talking about revenue?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that includes the 323 at the current tax, at the current mill rate. Secondly, this board reduced the cap on the elderly tax relief program.
Right.
And is that also accommodated in those numbers?
Yep.
Okay, good. And then the ECS, you mentioned 15% reduction from the January adjusted number, right? Not the original projected
Right.
number?
That's after we received a reduction of 171,000.
1,000 in January,
Yeah.
right.
So I think Ken pointed out at your meeting, it's actually a 20% discount
No, right.
from our original number.
Previous
Yeah.
year, you're right. And then one last question, the salaries at 1.9%, is that inclusive of what we have in reserve for personnel or
Yes.
not? It is?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Anyone else?
I have like a quick question, and I'll save some for Thursday, but In a lot of the vehicles that we have, you had mentioned one of the vehicles that is going to be in the bonding is 10 years old. Sometimes I think the public would look at some of the vehicles that the police, the fire, public works have, and they might be 10 years, not so much public works. Public works does an amazing amount with the vehicles for a very long period of time. But for police and fire, when you see 10 or 15 years old, or maybe the amount of miles, I think sometimes the public comment is, well, why can't they just keep using those vehicles? Why, you're 10 years old, why do they need to get new ones every 5 years, 10 years, whatever? Is there, could that be explained a little bit for the public? I think we know on this board, and maybe some of the people here, or most of the people here, but for the public, just why over 10 years? I mean, amount of miles, the usage, and maybe that's something that, you know, one of the two chiefs could answer, but I'm sure you could probably do it as well.
Well, when you speak about a vehicle, you have to talk about the type of vehicle, okay? And we're talking about the rescue vehicle. It's the reason, first of all, it goes into bonding. We're talking about $1 million vehicle. We're not talking about a police car.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, yeah.
Okay. There's a difference.
Big difference.
That vehicle, Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Why don't you come up? But while he's coming up, that vehicle is on the road all the time. Every time an ambulance goes out or a fire truck goes out, that truck goes with it, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, we can have the new assistant chief. Why don't you come up and explain?
There you go.
But the $1 million figure for the rescue truck is also including a lot of equipment. The extrication equipment that we use to cut people out of the cars is 30 years old. We've been rotating it over for the last 20 years, 20, 25, actually almost 30 years now. And that alone is about $120,000 just to replace that. So, and it's important to replace that equipment because the new technology on the, A, we can't get parts for it anymore, and B, you cannot even cut some of the new cars with it. The steel that's in the new cars and some of the plastics, you need to get stronger cutters. So there's a lot of stuff on it. The main air system on the truck, the breathing air that we use at fires, that's again 20 some odd years old. That needs to be replaced. That's about $25,000. There's a whole host of stuff to this truck. This truck is highly specialized. This is the first truck that shows up in front of your house for a medical emergency, for a fire, for a lockout of your car, a plumbing emergency. We handled it. Somebody who got trapped in a trench, somebody gets trapped in a machine. We've had all these things happen in Guilford, little old Guilford. They do happen. And this is the truck that handles all those things.
That answer, thank you. Yes, thank you.
And the current rescue truck has 108,000 miles and about 8,000 hours, which if you multiply that by 40, that tells you how many miles there really are. On about 320,000 miles.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? None? Back to the audience for one more round here. Anybody else want to ask? Hearing none. Did you want to make more comments about the state budget thing, or did you incorporate most of this?
Okay.
I know you had asked this.
Thank you for reminding me. At CCM, supposedly tomorrow, Mr. Bloss was correct, the General Assembly is going to perhaps pass some legislation that will allow towns to defer their referendum up until the end of June. So we will have that decision to deal with, okay? Number one. Number two, I agree with Mr. Bloss that I'm going on record right now that I do not want to see us send out a supplemental tax bill. Whatever we pass as a budget, whenever we pass it at referendum, is the budget. We can deal with it in different ways, but whatever we say the mill rate's going to be, at the time the voters vote, it's my pledge that that's the mill rate. So I just wanted to make that statement there. I don't know how this board feels about it, but that's my position.
Certainly everyone's welcome to an opinion. Joe and I had a conversation on this yesterday when we learned that this legislation was coming up, and I'm in agreement with Joe. We want to get this. We want to send out one tax bill. At least I do. I don't see a need to go back for more. And I think that puts us in a position where we have to be somewhat aggressive in terms of accommodating some cuts. Now, we're not going to be as aggressive as the governor would like us to be, but in the conversations I've also had with our elected representative, I know you talked to Representative Candelora, and I think you may have had a conversation with Mr. Scanlon, Rep. Scanlon, and maybe even Senator Kennedy. I've talked to both Senator Kennedy and Representative Scanlon, actually at the Guilford Fund for Education spelling bee the other night, which we did poorly in. Not quite as well as Ken's team did. But both of them are suggesting that what's going to come out of the legislature is not going to resemble anything close to what the governor is doing.
Exactly what I'm hearing. Yep.
Not that it's good news for the other part of our lives, but I think the governor was avoiding tax increases, and I think the legislature is going to actually look at some tax increases. And I think you probably saw the CCM proposal move the sales tax up to 7% and allocate 1 or 2% of the sales tax to municipalities to keep municipalities whole. And I understand that's getting some traction in Hartford. The other piece that both Senator Kennedy and Representative Scanlon mentioned to me was, in the governor's budget, there were 30 communities in the state that were winners, if you will, in terms of getting more money. That means there are 139 that were losers, and all those 139 towns have representatives and state senators who have to answer to people like you when you call them and say, well, what are you doing for us? So I'm fairly confident that very confident that the governor's budget, the impact of the governor's budget, will not be felt here to the degree that the governor would like. So I didn't. Everyone's, that's probably going to be the nature of most of our conversation on Thursday and Monday as to how far we want to go. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll have our spreadsheet so people can play with that number independently and see where it takes us going further on the ECS. And I think it probably makes sense to use the ECS number as the barometer to go up and down on. It doesn't make an awful lot of sense to start playing with pilot revenue. I'm gonna work it from that perspective. So, anybody else any comments on?
Well, the only thing I just want to add is that I want the public to, hope you all agree with me, to understand that once a budget is sent to town meeting and to referendum, that's the budget. And there's not going to be any smoke and mirrors about it. We're going to hit them later with something else.
Agreed.
That's my position.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. We will be reconvening on Thursday, same place, same time, 7:30. As is the tradition with all Board of Finance meetings, there will be an opportunity for public forum. We'll have public forum at the front end and at the close of our meeting on Thursday. We also have a budget workshop scheduled for Monday, and it's my anticipation that we will use both of those dates. Same protocol will be in place for Monday relative to public input and public forum. So with that,
I'll make the motion to adjourn if there's nothing further.
Second? Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? No. That one's unanimous.